Hello once again, watchers of good anime. My name is Nick Pell and this is my review of Island. So this is an anime which has been airing its 12 episode run on Crunchyroll. It's where I've primarily been watching it. And it aired all its episodes over the course of 3 months, and I did not even realize that this was the finale today. This anime is also based on a visual novel which I have not seen or know anything really about. And I guess I'll also mention this, I am going to talk about all 12 episodes of the show in this review, so if you have not seen Island or you have not finished it or something of that sort, probably stop watching now, come back when you've finished it, and we'll talk about it more then. And the general premise of Island is that it opens up with our primary protagonist, Setsuna. He is a guy who wakes up on the beach of an island with no memory of why he's there, how he got there, anything of that sort. And over the course of the first episode, he ends up in the employment of a young girl named Rine and her mother, who is in her room for the majority of the time due to an illness called sun blight syndrome. And this is basically an illness where if the person inflicted with it ends up being in sunlight for an extended period of time, they can be very, very ill, very, very fast and die. And so her mother is imposed by this illness, and so we really just see Rine as the master of this house, and she is the person who Setsuna primarily interacts with for his time at that facility. Over the course of the show, he also encounters two other young women, one named Sarah, who's kind of like a religious priestess-esque sorts on the island, and a young girl named Karen, who's kind of a rebellious type of person. She wants to go to the mainland to try to figure out where her mother is, and kind of rebels against her father, wanting her to get married to this random guy. And one thing which I did really appreciate about the first half of this show, per se, is that it does take a lot of time introducing us to these main three women and spending time with them and showing us their lives through Setsuna's eyes and giving them each kind of their own story, per se, because like I said, we have Karen, who's kind of the rebellious girl who wants to go to the mainland, so eventually Setsuna stops her wedding and takes her off to the mainland so she can figure out what's going on with her mother. Sarah has this prophecy of sorts where it's like she's going to die come her next birthday, and so there's a whole plot line surrounding that. And then Rine, 5 years ago, ended up on an island with a guy, similar name, Setsuna, and he basically made a boat so she could return to the island, and then he remained there, and she's trying to figure out what happens with him. And so we have that whole plotline going on. And so I just really enjoyed that I spent time with these three characters and just really gave us an insight to their world and just to who they are. Eventually though, when Setsuna and Rine are returning from her adventure trying to figure out what happened to Setsuna, and in this case he has died for a very long time, they're returning, there's a massive storm which hits, and Rine ends up dying. She drowns in the water. And so Setsuna, not being able to stand this, he ends up going into this time machine of sorts, which basically freezes him in time so that when Rine's next incarnation appears in the world, he will wake up and potentially have a way to save her. So it's kind of weird. And this is where my first negative of the show comes into. Maybe the visual novel of the game kind of focuses and spends a lot more time on this world, but I really wish we would have had more than 2 episodes in this timeline and in this universe, even just basically starting out seeing Setsuna wake up, run into this version of Rine, and just basically see their relationship develop, because we were basically kind of just thrust into it, and it almost seemed like they're just kind of trying to rush to the end at this point. And so it kind of falls into the same general nitpick that I have with a lot of shows which are very contained in their runs, is that I really wish we just had more of it. Just more of it to kind of develop over time, just get to kind of flesh out the world and the characters and everything, which everyone is basically fighting for. I thought that it did fine with the future timeline stuff and set up what it needed to for the last couple episodes, but I just wish we would have had more there. So eventually, due to the future timelines, Rine figuring out how to set up this machine, it's basically the same thing. Setsuna goes into it, he freezes in time, or is thinking he's going to go back to the past, and ends up back on the island and having his memories this time of everything which has transpired before, solves all these women's problems right away, right off the bat. He makes it so that Karen can get to the mainland and goes with her friends this time instead of him. He makes it so that Sarah has a good, happy birthday. It's not as the depressing thing that it was before. And then he also makes sure that Rene can get her closure and get back to the island safely. So he just takes these things and makes them very, very possible. And then during the future timeline, he ended up with a relationship with that version's Rene. They consummated that relationship, and he begins to realize that, oh hey, that version Rene, it ends up being the island's Rene's mother, and so he's her father. It's a really weird show, but does end up being this really touching love story ultimately, if not just a little bit weird. But the last episode, which really just pushes us to the end, obviously, really just made it work, I think, because while we didn't have a lot of time in the future timeline, you could tell that there was a relationship that was genuine between Setsuna and that version's Rene, and I just liked seeing that play out, and it just worked really nicely, and I just liked seeing the end result of that, seeing them get together, even though I have to wonder, with her being presumably like in her 40s at this point and Setsuna still being in his 20s, people would have to ask questions about that, I would think, but I don't know, maybe everyone's just cool with it for whatever reason. Music in the show, also very good in regards to instrumental stuff as well as the vocal music stuff, which comes into play every so often. It kind of acted as a foreshadowing device. Now that I kind of go back and watch some of the previous episodes, you get to see just the lyrics are hinting at what's to come, even though if you didn't really realize it or take them into account earlier. And so guys, overall, I thought The Island was a perfectly good, fun show to watch. I had a fun time watching it over the last 12 weeks, and I really enjoyed getting to know our main characters, even if the ending kind of started to direct its focus into Rene and her family, and a lot of the time travel aspects of the show. But it ends up being this really touching love story, and I would be lying if I did not say I got misty-eyed at the end. So yeah, that's me being a sap. But guys, those are my thoughts on Island. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Did you like it as much as I did? Did you hate it more than I did? Let me know. If you want to hear my thoughts on any of the characters, plot points, anything of that sort, let me know. I hope this thing comes to PS4 in regards to visual novel form, because I don't play Steam at all, and so I would love to see what other timelines there are, what other endings this show can end up being. Like, favorite, comment, and subscribe once again if you so choose. I appreciate it immensely. And as always, my people, my name is Nick Pell, and once again, keep on watching.